If there is no question, then we have to move to another topic, which is in the floor today. I want just say something about Dr. Ilias. He's a very distinguished researcher. I know him. We worked together in Qatar a few years ago. He was in charge of the
Prof. Ahmed, the Wi-Fi.
And who is talking?
Professor Ahmed, we cannot hear you.
Excuse me, is there anybody else? You cannot hear me. And now?
Now
my micro is open.
Now it is okay.
Okay. So Dr. Ilias, he's a distinguished scientist and the head of the electrical and energy storage at Oak Ridge National Lab. He served as adjunct professor at the University of Tennessee as well. Ilias, he is editor of a very known journal called the Journal of Power Sources with a very high impact factor. Ilias is a research director and professor at Qatar Foundation before. As I told you before, we have been together at Qatar Foundation. He is a material scientist at Argonne National Laboratory before. I think he worked there as a postdoc and as scientist and senior scientist. So his
Professor Ahmed.
So I don't know what's going on, but anyway, if you hear me, please, if you don't hear me, then tell me what's going on.
Now we can hear you. It seems that yes,
just
go ahead.
Let me finish, please. So the title of what Dr. Ilias will share with us is the next generation battery storage system. That is his field of interest. He is going to share now the screen. And
Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Ahmed, it's a great pleasure to you. What great pleasure actually with you all, the most known leaders in the solar field, and I had the pleasure working with you for many years, and I really enjoy your friendship and the invitation along with the virtual learning university.
We discussed lithium-ion batteries, the lithium cobalt oxide at that time, and did few experiments with his team at that time. And how it relates to some opportunities for Morocco. So to motivate the discussion, I would like actually to tell you a little bit about the U.S. national vision. Dr. before mentioned that R&D has expectations. And this is exactly what the United States has done, as the President Joe Biden announced an executive order about a year and a half ago that sets a new target to make vehicles sold in the 2030 time, zero emission vehicles. Those are going to be all battery electric vehicles or fuel cells based technology vehicles. So we understand that the electrification of transportation and stationary grid storage depend on critical materials. Today, lithium-ion batteries include several critical materials lithium, their own national strategies around supply chain for lithium-ion batteries. Years back, here, made in China strategy and strategy launched by the European Union of lithium-ion batteries. So the cost of the battery, as you may know, lithium-ion has decreased significantly during the life, from about 90%. And the transportation sector is the major sector that dominates the technology. China is projected to over 1 terawatt hour of lithium-ion cell production by 2025. Currently, the lithium-ion battery or other chemistries for consumer electronics, transportation, electric vehicles, but also let's not forget defense applications, that really can be distinct in their end-use application. So these are just some thoughts, just motivate the discussion and see where I'm going with this talk. So the United States, right after that presidential vision,
they came up with what we call a US national blueprint, and they form what we call a federal consortium for advanced batteries. So this is a cross-cutting consortium between different departments, the Department of Energy, Department of Defense, Department of State, of Commerce, and so on. And the vision there is truly to establish a secure battery material and supply chain that can support long-term US competitiveness, creation of jobs, enable decarbonization, advance social justice, and so on. And that vision is based on 5 pillars. And those are mainly linked to securing access to raw materials, refined materials, discover alternative for critical materials and components, support US growth, mainly in the processing of materials, enable that to meet domestic battery manufacturing demand, to stimulate US really cross-cutting supply chain to advance cell and pack production in-house and enable US end-of-life use and critical material recycling. This is very important topic. I'm glad that Dr. That's not only done by, but also done because the government is putting money. Billions of dollars are going to the sector. Looking at upstream, midstream, downstream recycling from all things related to raw materials, separation, chemistry, materials such as lithium, cobalt, nickel, graphite, phosphorus related compound, and so on. So it's a holistic approach really dealt with to secure the supply chain for the technology, to make sure that the technology has all the ingredients to be successful, to have long-term dominance, and so on. So really, it's about that. So the vision has been established. It has been categorized. There is money that we support that. There is about $7 billion now in the street to be invested for the technology. There is about $200 million that will actually deal with battery recycling, as you can see it in this slide. Some granularity on how the government is truly acting. There is what we call the bipartisan infrastructure law. This law is now enacted. It's really not a vision anymore. It's really signed, and the money is there, and the money actually is out in the street now. So there are many companies that are really competing for this money by writing up proposals. So this bill, or the bipartisan infrastructure bill, is about investing about $7 billion in battery supply chain over the next 5 years. And this is meant to, as I mentioned before, to actually make sure that we have a viable industry to supply the North American battery market. So, and this is done because we understand very well how the raw material production, material processing, refinement, battery material manufacturing, cell fabrication, battery pack, end of use, end of life, second use, those are very important issues when it comes to any battery system, specifically one of the most winning system, which is the lithium-ion battery. There is 2 battery awards out there, $50 million and $100 million, depending upon the size of investments. And the area of interest are really, as I mentioned, upstream, midstream. So all the way from refining, from mining, refining, processing, all the way to recycling. So with that kind of motivation slide, just making sure that we understand this is not an R&D by itself. It's not an R&D that is really not yielding a product, but this is an R&D that is subsidized by governments. Make sure that these green energies, technologies will actually create jobs and make sure that companies that will invest, such as Tesla and others, will actually make sure that the economy will be set to really be on a good or pave the way for these companies to be successful in the future. So just coming back to some timeline about lithium nickel oxide and lithium ion battery technology in general. So just coming to the root of the technology itself, back in the 1950s, the first material actually that is really the base of all the innovation, which is this lithium nickel oxide here, was discovered by pure coincidence at Oak Ridge National Lab. And I just happened to be an employee of Oak Ridge National Lab, and I'm so proud to announce that actually that first material was discovered here in this lab back in the 1950s. So this gentleman called Dyer, what he was trying to do, melting lithium hydroxide in a crucible of nickel. By doing that, he found that there is some sort of green powder that formed on the surface of this crucible. And by analyzing that by X-ray, he found that material is this lithium nickel oxide layered structure where lithium is intercalated between the metal slabs. John Goodenough, who is the Nobel laureate of 2019, the Nobel Prize of Chemistry, wisdom with his that cobalt can substitute nickel just because they're adjacent in the periodic table. And by doing so, he made this new material, the lithium cobalt oxide, which he synthesized back in the late 70s and early 80s. And that material actually constitutes today about, so this material really coming from this observation just changed the way we actually store energy. And Dr. Yoshino from Sony back in 1991, with his wisdom, he coupled this lithium cobalt oxide with graphite, and now he made a full battery. So a battery basically consists of three main components: a cathode, anode, and electrolyte. So these two major components, Yoshino, who is really a famous engineer in Sony at that time, just had the wisdom to couple this lithium cobalt oxide with graphite and made the first workable lithium ion battery. The first one was discovered in 1991. And then Tesla had the wisdom to make these in an electric vehicle, and the story goes on. So just making sure that we have that in mind. Now, how the market is going to grow in the next day. And we've seen that there is huge competitiveness going around material supply chain. So today the market size is about 300 gigawatt hour. This is poised to grow to actually at least by 2030. And the three major applications are still consumer electronics, things like laptops, cell phones, electric mobility, which is electric vehicles mainly, or lifts and things related to transportation in general, and energy storage. Energy storage is also going to grow. Energy storage, those are stationary energy storage systems that can be coupled, integrated with solar farms, wind farms, and so on. So the major countries are China. Of course, China will see at least half of the market share in the next decade as they really gambled around this technology. They really want to dominate the technology upstream all the way to downstream, the United States, Europe, and the rest of the world. So how about Morocco? Morocco, of course, has certain things that can offer, especially the resources. So the market in general is growing at around 25% annual rate. Transportation is going to be dominating that market, about 80%. US will have about 15% of that market. So now, if you look at what's going on around the world, and this is going to basically across the board, all the OEMs, all the big car companies, Ford, Tesla, GM, all Volvo, Mercedes, all of them, they are all having in mind electrification. They all have programs, serious program. In Europe, for example, you can see all these major players are putting together establishment of supply, manufacturing, factories, battery cell and pack companies, and so on. So you can see what's going on in Europe. It's really fascinating. It's a huge transformation in the industry sector. And if you look at China specifically, China is an example where this technology is really growing at a much faster pace compared to the rest of the world. So the EV market will dominate the lithium-ion battery application. And I'm sure that you heard many stories in the media about the technology and how the technology is going to transform the way we actually make transportation in the next decade. In the United States, if you look at the dynamic of the market, you can see many players all over the world coming to invest in the technology. And the reason, because the United States has the largest traffic and transportation sector dominance compared to the rest of the world. You can see companies such as LG Chem in association with GM. You can see these JVs being formed between SK and Ford. You can see things related to Toyota being established in North Carolina, Microvast, VW. All these big companies are coming, and actually they're being established and spending billions of dollars, securing thousands of jobs, just making sure that the transportation sector is not going to rely anymore on ICEs, the internal combustion engine systems, but is going actually to be moving toward full electrification by 2050. So if you look at how the lithium-ion battery costs actually came down, it's a fascinating story. About a decade ago, the cost was over $1,000 per kilowatt hour. Now it's only about $135 per kilowatt hour in 2020, and it stays around that even now. The United States has a goal of getting that cost down to $60 per kilowatt hour. So again, you know, investments, dollars, strategies, but there is a goal for these companies to be accomplished, to be achieved. That's $60. This is a presidential executive order. So those companies should really make sure that they have R&D and effect that will drive down the cost of the technology. And this has been actually stewarded by the Department of Energy during the last 2 decades. So significant, around $2 billion went into the R&D since the years 2000. And you can see that R&D actually helped enable the cost bringing that cost down from that over $1,000 to what we are today. So just continuing on the same pace here, if you look at the countries that dominate and are most proactive in the technology, China, of course, the United States, South Korea, Japan, and Germany, and those are the five most active countries. But if you look at the story during the last 30 years, as I mentioned before, Japan actually is the first country that discovered this lithium-ion battery. You know, the technology happened by Sony. If it wasn't Sony that actually put that technology in the market, we would not be here today. So the dominance between 1990 and 2000, the dominance was by Japan. Between 2000 2010, the United States came to the play, of course, along with the others, but you can see clear shift to China. China start really putting subsidies, investment, encouraging R&D, getting scholarships, and so on. And the technology start booming back in 2005. Now, from 2010, there is a clear paradigm shift. You can see clearly that China is dominating around 50% of the science, the R&D, the IP, the papers, the market share, and the benefits and everything else. So it's really a technology where the Chinese have realized early on, this is where we're gonna put our money, and it's yielding them that outcome now. Now, one quick slide on next generation batteries. Of course, there is a winning technology, which is the lithium-ion. There is today no battery technology that can compete with that, apple to apple, in terms of overall performance. But there are R&D technologies. These are what Ismail said, mentioned. Those are the long-term technologies, probably 5-10 years technologies. So on the R&D side, we can still invest on those technologies to make them mature enough to have a market share down the road. But there are many issues associated with those. Lithium sulfur, for example, solid state batteries, sodium ion batteries, and the rest here, you know. So those are technologies really at the lab scale. They're at their infancy stage at the moment. They still need a lot of R&D money, but they're not the winning technologies at the moment. Those will be actually enabled probably down the road, but the lithium-ion is the technology where the industry is needing subsidies such that it can actually move to the next stage of creating jobs and making the prosperity needed for the societies. Now, China, of course, is leading the world on the lithium-ion, but also on solid state. Solid state batteries mainly are different than lithium-ion in the sense that they contain no liquid electrolyte. That's the main difference. Without going to detail, China also is realizing that not only we should dominate the existing technology, the winning one, but also the down the road technology, which is the solid state. It is believed to be one of the major R&D endeavors in the battery area. So this is an important technology that really students should be looking after when it comes to doing PhDs and things like that. So here at Oak Ridge National Lab, we have a very clear vision. And our vision is really strictly linked to the mission of the US Department of Energy. In that, we are trying to increase energy kilogram, so we can have on a single charge over 300 miles of runaway. Reduce the cost to $60, as I mentioned before, and enhance the performance and safety and decrease the charge time to 10 to 15 minutes. This is very important when it comes really to the acceptance by the public. We don't conceive the you need to recharge quickly so you can hit the road and continue your journey. So In terms of criticality of achievement, we are working on less critical materials. Cobalt, unfortunately, is a very critical material. It's rare. It's not going to be very sustainable when it comes to really this technology when it grow and rocketed down the road. So it's very critical to look at alternative materials other than nickel and cobalt, and probably the LFP could be one of the technologies, and Morocco has certain capabilities to offer in that. So we have been working on several battery technologies with the mindset to increase the energy density such that we can increase the electrical range. So we work on a variety of projects dealing with LFP, for example, this lithium iron phosphate. Many R&D scientists in Morocco are working on that, including scientists in the University of Qadi Iyad, for example, in Marrakesh, or other colleagues, for example, in the University Mohammed Sadis or other universities. So really, it's about systems that span over many cathode or variety of cathodes, anodes, looking at a variety of systems, mainly for grid applications and electric vehicles. So what we have really an R&D. I don't have time to go over all the branches here and all the sectors that we cover, but you can see this facility here, which is really an instrumental facility that enable us to transition technology from the bench scale, from the small scale, all the way to prototyping. Prototyping is very important. In the academia world, we care much about publications and intellectual property and things like that. In a national lab, we're really about technology development. We really need to make sure that the technology can be mature enough such that through licensing the technology to industry and working with industry, that technology can have a market stream. And we have many examples where we had been successful transitioning and transferring technology to industry. So all these capabilities, such as this battery manufacturing facility that I lead for the Department of Energy, making sure that technology can be transitioned, can be scaled up. All the risk associated with technology can be brought down at a certain level of technology development. The lithium-ion components just make sure that we understand recycling. The main components in any battery systems are the cathodes, anodes, and electrolyte that as I mentioned before. And because the technology cannot be successful without securing these three main components. So, and that's the big battle and fight between all these companies and countries today, is really making sure that we have a secure supply chain such that we can ensure longevity, durability, and technology, and make sure that technology will prosper moving forward. So it's not only about, if you look at the material cost breakdown for any battery system, so these are categorized mainly in 2/3 of materials and 1/3 is really about manufacturing. And in the manufacturing, it's all about cell, electrode engineering, cell assembly, formation cycle, and pack assembly. But if you look at the cost of any battery system, especially the material costs, those can be broken down to many components, positive electrode, negative electrode, and mainly positive electrode. I can give an example of lithium cobalt oxide. Negative electrode, that's graphite, all the carbon binders, the electrolyte, the current collectors, the cell hardwares, the jackets, all of these make sure that the battery cell assembly is really critical. So if you look at the components that make up any battery system, these are various. So you need really to look at the supply chain, because without a cathode, that battery cannot exist. So that's really why you see all these funding out there, making sure that those companies can have a sustainable supply chain next door. So these batteries is all about materials, and manufacturing. Really, the material is very important. I would say it's 2/3 of the battery component system, and about 1/3 is all about manufacturing. So just to give an example about a supply chain. So we used to think about batteries really about components. But if you look at, for example, an NMC, this is an NMC 622 material that is commercial today. So it's not only about thinking about the cell, the cathode, the anode, the current collector, and so on, but you have to think about the raw materials that are involved in the production of these components. Siaq Al mentioned cobalt sulfate. Cobalt sulfate, Morocco will sell it to Renault. Renault will make these lithium cobalt oxide from that sulfate. So this cobalt sulfate will be actually at this level, at the ore requirement and refining, that will go to process a material, which is the cathode, and the cathode will go to the engineering of the cells. So really, it's all linked. If you don't have a clear idea about where you're going to get that ore or that mineral, the supply chain will see really weakness, and you'll have to really mitigate that weakness. LFP, for example, same story on the LFP side. Really, you need to think holistically about, for example, Morocco can sell phosphoric acid. Somebody else will make these lithium iron phosphate from that phosphoric acid, and so on. So really, when Morocco is thinking about lithium iron phosphate, not only they should think about phosphorus, but they'll have to think about lithium, about iron, where they're going to procure that. Where is it that is going to come from, and at what cost? Does it make sense? Really, is it economically feasible? All these questions should be understood early on, such that you can have a prosperous economy around that technology. Recycling, just a quick slide here. Recycling is very important. If you think about lithium-ion batteries, we will have about 11 million metric tons of these batteries by 2030. That's a huge pile of these battery systems. Today, we have two processes, the pyro and metallurgical process, and direct recycling is another way to really deal with these batteries. In that, we can actually recover the cathodes and the current collectors directly without going to the chemistry, where you basically either fire everything, burn everything, get the slags, do the separation chemistry, or really going down the hydrosulfuric acid dissolution process. That hydrometallurgical process is really environmentally not benign, and it's really step-limited process. So if you look at the materials, for example, the low energy density materials, the LFP, and the high energy density materials, the lithium cobalt oxide, as an example, you can see clearly that the raw material really costs a lot compared to the final material. So you can see, for example, for lithium cobalt oxide, the cost of the raw material, the cobalt oxide itself, is over $30 per kilowatt per kilogram, while the cost of the final material is just over that. And that's very important to keep in mind. Major advancement, for example, what we've done here in the United States, in my lab, we were able actually not only to manufacture these lithium ion cell prototype, but also find a way to get the current collectors and recover the anode, the cathode materials from spent lithium ion batteries, where they end their life. We can actually recover these materials and put them back into manufacturing of new cells and packs. This is very, very important topic, and that's why you see that the United States and the rest of the world is really investing huge money around battery recycling. And this could be actually a topic of PhD theses. It could be a topic of a lot of R&D, for example, in Morocco. So with that, really the main message to me, from me to you, it's to think about the battery value chain holistically, from the mining, going through the refining, process materials, cell fabrication, packs, all the way to recycling. Each and every step is very, very important to the technology. And that's how the world is rethinking the battery value chain. With that, my really concluding remark quickly, energy storage, stationary batteries for solar technology or wind technology, for transportation, for portable mobile technologies, for defense applications. Those are very, very important. They're going to skyrocket, they're going to increase in capacity, in size, and so on. So the price is poised to decrease with time, because just that's the rule of the market. And we can see that there is a huge opportunity in really getting those costs down by 2030. Lithium iron phosphate, when it relates to Morocco, I think it's gaining a lot of steam, but it's a low energy density material. Manufacturing is less complex. It has a lot of value added components to it. So it's worth to really start thinking about, if possible, make it, not to do the R&D. The R&D around LFP is done. There's nothing to discover there. There is no way we can go back to university. This is really industry. This is really about investment, about jobs, about doing real things. Asia is gonna dominate. And I would say, government assistance is very, very important. It's not only about a vision I mentioned. Vision is very important, but vision has to be substantiated. It has to be assisted with dollars and with clarity in what the expectations can be, such that the technology can have really the pillars so to be successful. With that, I hope I did not really pass my time here, but I would like to thank Professor Ahmed Ainawi. Thank you very much for the opportunity. It was absolute pleasure to know Professor Salim Omar, and I'd like to thank all the colleagues here at Oak Ridge National Lab, all my colleagues that I lead. It's about 45 scientists and postdocs and researchers. We're all passionate. We make things happen, and a lot of times in silence. I'd like to thank the Department of Energy, who trusted us for many, many years with real funding, and the names are mentioned here, such that we can have a really great turnaround around our technologies. Thank you very, very much, and I'm happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Salim. The floor for yours.
Thank you, mashallah. It's a wonderful lecture. Thank you, Doctor. Prof. And let's go for the questions or any comments also.
I can answer in French if, or in Arabiya, or it's okay, whatever comes.
Okay. It is open for anyone who wants to ask or participate or give a comments.
Yes.
There's nothing till now.
We have questions. If there is no one in the audience, I would like to ask Dr. Ilias. First of all, thank you very much. I'm really one of the person who's proud of you, because if I see your path from Bordeaux to United States, now to Qatar, again to United States, and how you are able every time to build up a group, state-of-the-art group. I saw your lab in Qatar. I heard now about your lab with thanks to the Mohammed Khalil. He was from your side. I want to ask you one question about the energy transition and electrical car, either a battery car or fuel cell car. What will be the contribution of the of this issue into the energy transition, because everyone has a car, and actually most of the car are producing carbon dioxide, and I think you get my questions. What is exactly?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's a great question, Ahmed. And you know very well, you were in Germany for many, many years, and you're very familiar with fuel cell technology or hydrogen. Hydrogen, along with batteries, are gaining a lot of steam. And there is actually, just 2 days ago, there is $8 billion competition money out there here in the United States to fund 4 hubs on hydrogen and hydrogen storage, production, and so on. So these are 2 competing technologies. I don't see them like competing myself. Each of them has specific market. When I talk, Sehmet, to OEMs meaning the car companies, and when we talk to them, and those are the GMs, the Fords, the Teslas, all of them, Mercedes, Volvo, they have tendency to agree that lithium-ion battery technology will dominate small cars. Those are the sedan cars, the 4 or 5 passenger cars. That's really given. You know, it's very, very difficult for fuel cells to compete for that market just because of price. However, fuel cells has another huge market, which is the large trucks, basically. And if you heard about the super truck initiative here in the United States, so basically lithium-ion cannot compete for that market because it's huge, it has a huge volume. So for transportation needing really trains and trucks and boats and all these huge transportation means, would the fuel cell and hydrogen-based technology would make more sense. So that's what we're getting as a feedback from all these executive and companies.
Thank you. There is a question from Alian. She is saying, do you think that Morocco has the infrastructure to support EV integration? And the second question, and what about hydrogen cars? Please.
Yeah. I'll start with the second one, Professor Salim. The hydrogen cars, as I mentioned, you know, for small sedan cars, light duty cars, it's very difficult for hydrogen or fuel cells technology-based cars to compete with lithium-ion. This is very much given. I can send out reports. Not only that, it's not a biased opinion. This is really an agreed upon, worldwide, I would say, agreed upon opinion about lithium-ion. Now, hydrogen would make sense, as I mentioned, for trucks and things like that. The first question, the Morocco having the infrastructure. Well, the truth is that no, it does not have the infrastructure to deal with lithium-ion battery production or at the large scale. R&D is being done in universities. We have a lot of great professors, researchers doing things here and there, probably motivated by their own ambitions and things like that. But I would say, and I might be wrong, you know, I'm not living in Morocco. I follow from time to time, but I would say there isn't a comprehensive vision at the government level really to support and sustain such a technology. So as I mentioned, you know, without money and government support and the political support, you can do whatever you want, but a research professor can really not move the technology upstream, you know, as Dr. Aqlai mentioned, and I agree completely with him. Professor can do great things. It's stopped at the publication stage. Really, to get the technology to take another level, you really need a vision supported with money.
Thanks. Any other questions, please? So that's all. Prof. Ahmed.
Yes. Okay. I have many questions, but I think I will stop here. And I want to thank you very much, Ilias. I hope you will come one day to Morocco and give a talk in conferences, and we see you again. And I think you will also bring a lot to Moroccan University in the future and to the virtual learning university. Now we have you, and we will continue to ask you to come and to give us some talks together with Smail Saadoun. He's also with us. So thank you very much. And if there is any other question, if there is no other question, then we will move to the next talk. And I saw already Dr. Greg Smigstad from California. He's already there. I see his photo.
And just one word, Ismail.
Yes,
I would like to salute you and the team at the Virtual Learning University for the initiative. This is a great initiative done mainly by passion. I really enjoyed the experience. And if you need me, I'm here. Thank you very much again. I'll have to jump off to another meeting, but again, thank you very much. And Professor Salim, great to meeting you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Okay, I want also to thank Jamila, Dr. Jamila in Casablanca. She's behind the scene and she's taking care of everything there.